another YouTube video. In today's video, guys, I'm going to be ranking the Friday the 13th movies from the worst to the best. But first, I do have some announcements to make. I know you guys have a lot of questions rolling through your head. You guys are like, where is... Don't say like, you fucking dumbass. So I know you guys probably have a lot of questions rolling through your head. You're probably thinking, why isn't the Halloween ranking out? You're probably expecting a few other videos that I announced that were supposed to be out. I figured I would actually give you some bonus videos, so I wanted to do a re-ranking on the Friday the 13th franchise since I have not done one in a few years. And the last time I did it, I don't think I had watched all of the Friday the 13th movies at that time. So I wanted to do a re-ranking on it because it is October, and I wanted to do some of, like, basically title-related videos for my channel, because I know everybody likes to talk about how my channel is called R is Horror and you should live up to the name and stuff like that. So I wanted to live up to that and give you a whole bunch of bonus content this month instead of just doing the Halloween ranking and stuff like that. So I'm going to be doing a Friday the 13th ranking, Halloween ranking, which I'm going to record just after this. I'm going to be doing a Halloween masks ranking and actors ranking. I won't be doing anything else on Friday the 13th related, but I figured I would do something else other than just Halloween for this month. So we're going to be doing Friday the 13th, and I'm also going to be doing a pacer test. We're going to be doing some DVD content, hopefully a DVD video in future, probably next month when I do have the Diary of a Wimpy Kid ranking, which will be coming out. But first I'm going to be doing that DVD tier list, the official tier list this time, which will be a much longer video than my last one. So obviously I'm dressed accordingly, and I know some of you might be thinking, why are the lights off? You're not used to the lights being off. I already made a take for this video, and the last time I went to edit it, I had all the videos downloaded, and there's this light that flashed through 75% of the video, and I said, I am not uploading this, so I apologize for that. This video would have probably been up either today or the day before if that was not the case, so I really do apologize for that. So I'm going to try to get this video up as quick as possible. And one more thing that I want to address is that some of you may be asking, are you going to be including Never Hike Alone and Never Hike in the Snow in this ranking? I know some other channels have done that in the rankings, but I thought that it would be very difficult to put them in this ranking. I have watched both of them, but I thought it would be very difficult for them to be put in this ranking, and also it would be unfair to put in relatively short Friday the 13th films that obviously the director of them does not have as big of a budget to make better kills and stuff like that. So I'm not going to be including Never Hike Alone and Never Hike in the Snow. And in this ranking, I'm going to be basing it solely off of the plot and the characters and those main aspects to the movie, and not so much how Jason looks, how the Jason is acting, and stuff like that. It's going to be focused on how the characters are acting, and how good the characters are, how well the plot is constructed, but not necessarily how the Jason looks. And I thought it was only fair that I did that because I am making additional rankings for Halloween after the ranking comes out for that. That will be based off of those different aspects that I won't be talking about in the regular Halloween ranking. So that's all that I have to address. Read the community post that you can stay updated with any future content, and join the Discord. Link will always be in the description of every video. Let's get straight on to this ranking. Number 12, and this one I unfortunately do not have an individual copy for. You'll see that many of the sequels I do not have an individual copy for, unfortunately. So I will just put a picture on the side of the screen. At number 12, I am going to put Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. I just took a take on this, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to put Part 8 up here because Part 8, I have come to realize that it is even worse than the next things on the list. Part 8, there are just so many problems with Part 8, and Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, for one thing, does not live up to its name. Half of the movie just wasn't taken advantage of. They put Jason on a cruise ship instead of Manhattan for the most part, and that was their biggest mistake. If we would have had that Manhattan-type setting where Jason, for the most part, could be hidden from authorities or other people, it would have been so much better and would have lived up to its name, obviously. But we have 75% of this movie took in place on the cruise ship setting with mediocre characters and mediocre final girl and final guy, I guess I should say. because they both survive at the ending of the film. And when we do get to Times Square and we do get those few iconic moments where Jason is just standing in the middle of Times Square, the final battle is really, really bad. I think it's one of the worst final battles I've seen in a slasher horror movie. What are some of the bad things about it? Well, for one thing, it's very underwhelming. Not a lot of good stuff involved in it. When Jason is in the sewer and the toxic water passes him, his mask comes off and he makes this elephant-like noise, and it's just really, really cringy, and I hate that scene. So the ending is really unsatisfying. It's underwhelming. Final battle, just really terrible. Once again, we get mediocre characters on a setting that could have been taken better advantage of if we had Manhattan. And it reoccurs a lot in this film that this CGI Jason keeps popping up for some reason, and every time that he pops up, they use a different CGI Jason for whatever reason. It's like they weren't satisfied with the first CGI Jason, so they kept trying harder and harder to make a good CGI Jason, but they kept failing over and over again. So that got really annoying. The kills weren't really great, except for the iconic kill where Jason is punched like 1,000 times, or about, I think it was 120 times in total, and Kane Hodder actually had some padding on and whatnot during the taking of the scene. So the making behind this kill was really interesting to me. But the only good kill was when Jason just straight up delivers the final punch and his head goes into the dumpster. The rest of the kills, they're okay. So I think that's all there is to say about Jason Takes Manhattan. Originally, this was going to be at the number 10 on my list, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to shove it at number 12 because I realize how bad this movie is, and I know I've seen other people put this at number 12 on their list. So I thought it was fair. Let's get on to the next spot. Number 11, I know this may spark a lot of haters. I'm going to put A New Blood here. I know what you're saying. A lot of you are probably going in your head, Jason Goes to Hell is worse. This movie is worse. This movie is worse. Come on, what's wrong with A New Blood? Once again, I originally was not going to put A New Blood here. I had it a few spots higher in my list. But I came to realize that A New Blood just isn't as good as the movies above it. And I'll explain more, especially when I go on to Jason Goes to Hell, because I have a lot of explaining to do there. But A New Blood, I am not a fan of this film. From the very beginning, I was never a fan of this film, but I never came to realize how much I didn't like it until now, or I guess I should say, I didn't come to realize that other movies are better than I originally thought. I thought because it has Jason in it and a few other things that it was better than these films. But I came to realize that this movie just isn't as good as the films before it, and I'll explain more when I get onto those films. But A New Blood, for going in a different direction, because obviously when we had Jason Lives, they, for the most part, stuck with their typical plot for Jason. In this one, they switch up the protagonist. The protagonist now can stand somewhat of a chance against Jason because she has telekinetic powers. And I thought for this movie, for being able to go into a different direction, and it didn't have to go in a different direction, it chose to go in a different direction, it did not execute well. And that's why I think that Jason Goes to Hell is better, because Jason Goes to Hell had no option, and it still executed it better than in Friday the 13th, A New Blood. So I'll explain more when I get on to Jason Goes to Hell, but that's the main reason why I put A New Blood here. I'm not a big fan of the protagonist not having telekinetic powers to fight against Jason. Just really unrealistic to the point where it's goofy and stupid, so I don't like it as an idea to try to turn the tables a bit and get out of the typical Friday the 13th plot setting with the characters and whatnot. The characters aren't bad, they're just mediocre. They're pretty much the same as with Manhattan, at the same level, pretty much. The kills, I think they're decent kills. That's another reason why I think Jason Goes to Hell is better, and I'll talk more about that when we get further on to the list, because, spoiler alert, Jason Goes to Hell is next up on the list, and I'll explain why I think A New Blood... Fucking... At number 11, and this may spark controversy, but I am going to be going with A New Blood. And you'll see number 10 is going to be Jason Goes to Hell. And I know a few of you are probably screaming at me right now, asking why did you put Jason Goes to Hell above New Blood? Now, there's a few reasons why I'm putting Jason Goes to Hell up here. For one thing, I felt bad putting it so low on the list just because it did not include Jason in it. This movie reminds me very greatly of Halloween 3, which I enjoy a lot more for being a black sheep of a franchise than Jason Goes to Hell, but that's because I think Halloween 3 gives me nostalgia and I thought was executed better. But Jason Goes to Hell originally was at number 12 on my list, but I decided that Jason Takes Manhattan and A New Blood are worse than Jason Goes to Hell, so I felt bad putting it at number 12 just because Jason wasn't in it. And that's not the only reason why, but I would have felt really, really bad. And also, for a movie being forced to not include Jason in it, Sean Cunningham stated himself that if you're going to make a sequel, it cannot have Jason in it. So we only had Jason in a few parts. At least Kane Hodder was the one acting in it. So those parts, Jason looks really cool, but they don't really add anything to the quality of life for this movie. But I thought for a movie that was being forced to go in a different direction, and I've seen the interviews on the director, and I respected the direction that he was trying to go. Don't think it was executed perfectly, but they surprisingly executed it, I think, better than A New Blood, which puts it higher than A New Blood. But what are a few things that are bad about this film? There are a few scenes where we have kills, and the killer, which is always a random killer because Jason is going body to body in this film. When we see the killer on screen, it's a bit goofy seeing somebody who's not Jason kill them in a Friday the 13th movie. But when they're being killed off screen, I'm totally okay with it because we've had three other Friday the 13th movies that had most of the kills off screen. So that was one of the reasons, and I don't think there was any other reason besides that. So basically just Jason wasn't in most of the film, and that killed it in those parts where it wasn't Jason who was killing them when they showed it on screen. If it was all off screen, I wouldn't really have a problem with Jason not being in this film because you wouldn't even notice it. But the kills are really, really great. Some of them are pretty gory. And I think that's all there is to say. I don't want to drag this along too long. So Jason Goes to Hell goes at number 10. Number 9 is the original Friday the 13th. And I know some people have put the original Friday the 13th really low on their list. Some of them maybe a little higher on their list. So some of you might be a little mad at me. And I'm going to do all the commemoration I can before slamming on this movie. First of all, obviously, without this movie, we would not have the rest of the sequels before it. And this movie, it sucks. It's very unfortunate for this movie because they tried something different for a slasher movie, and once they made a sequel with Jason being the killer, everybody immediately got attached to that instead of Pamela being the killer. So it's really unfortunate, but that is one of the reasons why it's lower on this list. But I think it's better for the most part than Jason Goes to Hell because more of the kills are off screen than on Jason Goes to Hell. I think there are only maybe 1 or 2 kills where we see Pamela Voorhees either fighting somebody or killing somebody. The kills are pretty great. Your average early on bloody Friday the 13th kills. The acting is really weird at times. I'll talk about this a lot later on in my list. It has that early Friday the 13th acting that is really bad and really cringy. The characters are okay. I don't think the final girl is one of the most amazing final girls. She's definitely not done really well when we get to part 2. So I wish that she was just in the original Friday the 13th and not brought back into part 2. But I think she's an okay final girl. Nothing too special. I think there are a lot of final girls that just outbeat her. I think that's all that I have to say about the original Friday the 13th. Just very unfortunate and unusual that an original to a slasher franchise is ranked this low. So number 9, the original Friday the 13th. Number 8 is going to be Part 5, A New Beginning. Another one where it gets ranked lower on my list because this was another movie where they were trying to go in a different direction after the franchise was supposed to be ended. And for going in a different direction, it was not the best film that, threw a curveball at us and tried to go in a different direction, but it certainly wasn't the worst either. I do have a soft spot for A New Beginning. I know some people absolutely hate this movie. I enjoy it quite well. I just watched it a few days ago, actually. But I think the movies before further up in this ranking that went into a different direction are ranked higher because I think they were executed better and their different direction was just a better idea. So that's why A New Beginning, mainly that's why A New Beginning gets ranked lower on this list than those movies. But there are also a ton of other reasons why. For going in a different direction, they kind of confused us towards the ending of the film where I believe it's the protagonist who is laying in the hospital or whatever, and they just confused the whole plot and stuff like that. I thought it was unnecessary that they did it. They could have just left it with a simple plot for bringing back a Friday the 13th film. Roy Burns wants to get revenge because his son died. That's all they needed to do. They didn't need to confuse it towards the ending of the film. So I don't have any problem with Jason not being... Technically, he's not actually Jason. It's just Roy Burns. But most of the kills are off-screen until we get to the final battle of the film, where we finally do get to see Jason in this film. A lot of the characters' acting is really bad, but I think it's so bad that it's almost likable. It gives me that 80s bad acting nostalgia that the other movies, they just didn't give me that nostalgia because they weren't bad enough. So it's kind of odd that I actually kind of like the bad acting, and some of the characters are pretty likable. There's this little boy, I forget what his name was in the film, but he was this little colored boy in the movie who he just did absolutely great. He was a great charm into this film. Tommy Jarvis, not his best performance in this film. I think it was actually his worst performance out of the 3 films that he starred in. Certainly not bad, but I think people enjoyed the calm and collected Tommy Jarvis a lot better in Part 6 and the young Tommy Jarvis in Part 4. So I could understand why they made Tommy Jarvis so aggressive towards people, and he refused to talk, and he still had somewhat of childish behavior throughout the film. I just thought I liked the more calm and collected Tommy Jarvis in Part 6 and the kid Tommy Jarvis in Part 4. So Tommy Jarvis did not make his best performance in this film. The final girl that we get in this film, not really a big fan of her. I was actually enjoying the scenes where the little boy in this film was the one who was beating up Jason in the final battle. Those were a lot more enjoyable than when she was fighting him, and also Tommy Jarvis as well. So, yeah, the acting is really goofy, which does bring it back or down, but I do kind of enjoy the goofy acting a little bit. Kills are really, really great. Unfortunately, some of them were nerfed by the MPA, unfortunately, but still pretty gory, still pretty enjoyable. Characters, I think some of the characters, it's almost like they want to make you hate them. Some of the other characters are not really throwaway, they're just kind of there, they don't add anything, so just your average Friday the 13th characters for the most part. There's only 2 characters that are really throwaway, and if you've watched A New Beginning, you know who I'm talking about. So, yeah, New Beginning, number 8. Number 7 is going to be Jason X, and it was a little bit difficult to decide which was better, Jason X or not A New Beginning, Freddy vs. Jason, but I thought that Freddy vs. Jason was a little bit better, so Jason X gets the number 7 spot. Once again, for a movie that was trying to go in a different direction, they did an okay job bringing Jason into space, which a lot of people would think that is way too far-fetched, but it ended up working pretty well. For the first half of this film, we have the regular camp-looking Jason, and then when the basically AI that shot him up, shot off some of his appendages, he got reconstructed by this, I don't know, some computer feature in the film. We get the iconic Uber Jason. So we get 2 different Jasons in this movie, which is really interesting. And a time jump as well into the way, way future. But yeah, for a movie that brought Jason into the space, which I was so doubtful that this film would be great when I first heard of it, for Jason being in space, they actually did a pretty solid job. The characters are your regular Friday the 13th characters, if you ask me. Despite being in space, the characters feel pretty much the same as any other Friday the 13th characters that we've seen in the franchise. But the kills are really great. We obviously have that iconic kill where he sticks her head in the liquid nitrogen and smashes her face. Very iconic film. Our kill. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm messing up my wording. I probably did many times earlier on this list, and I'm probably going to be kicking myself when I edit this video. But yeah, kills are really great. Characters, they're decent. Jason looks awesome. I love how we have two different sides to Jason in this movie. I think they did a pretty well job for, not too shabby, for bringing Jason into space. I don't think there's really much more to say about Jason X. I know some people absolutely hate this film. I know some people actually do have a soft spot for Jason X, and I'm one of those people. I've come to like it a lot more. If you would have asked me a few years ago, I probably would have put this farther down my list. But Jason X, it goes at number 7. Number 6, and it was a little bit difficult to decide which was better, Jason X or Freddy vs. Jason, but I thought Freddy vs. Jason was just a hair better. So let's talk about the positives and the negatives of Freddy vs. Jason. I was very doubtful that this movie would be a good movie before I watched it. Because we have two polar opposite characters being put into a slasher matchup. I just didn't think it was going to work for a movie. And for the 10-year hype that we had for Freddy vs. Jason, because obviously they gave us a little hint at the ending of Jason Goes to Hell, they paid us off pretty well with a nice matchup. There were a lot of good battle scenes, especially the final battle, which is just really gory. It tends to drag, but at least we get more gore and more punches being thrown, so that's always a bonus. But yeah, I think this movie paid off pretty well for the 10-year hype that fans who have been, people who have been fans of this franchise way longer than I have, certainly got the well-deserved hype that they need. The hype was paid off really well. Got a lot of good battle sequences, a lot of good kills. People are just being slaughtered left and right, especially because of that cornfield party scene. Jason just slaughters a crap ton of people. But there are quite a few negatives in this film, and one of them is, I guess it's not really related to, it doesn't really matter. It's awkward because I don't want to include Freddy into this, but he is a part of the plot, so I'm just going to discuss it anyway. There is definitely an imbalance between the character, or the antagonist kills and their showtime and stuff like that. Jason gets a lot of the kills. Freddy only gets one kill in this movie, if I remember correctly. And Freddy is a lot more front and center, though, because he's the one who's spewing one-liners at Jason while he just kind of sits there. Another thing that I didn't like about this movie, they unnecessarily confused stuff and tried to change things up, especially when the protagonist said that, or at many different points, they kept trying to claim that Jason was scared of water and Freddy was scared of fire. Does not make any sense. Don't know why you even had to bring that up. Since when did Jason become scared of water? Just does not make any sense. So they confused it for no reason. I think that the final girl is okay. She reminds me of Halloween Resurrection. There are times where she makes quotes that make no sense and end up just being cringy, even though they're trying to make like a really awesome movie quote that's supposed to hit us at the heart. But they end up just being cringy. And there's other times where she's an okay final girl. What else? The side characters, for the most part, they're okay. There are a few throwaway ones in there, but for the most part, they're just your average Friday the 13th characters. But other than that, we get a lot of good final battle sequences. I think, or not final battle sequences, but a lot of great battle sequences between Jason and Freddy that are the highlight of this movie, and they certainly paid it off really well between the clash between these two. So Freddy vs. Jason goes at number 6, smack dab in the middle of this list. Number 5, and some of you may once again be screaming at me because you're thinking of other movies before this, I'm sure. But at number 5, I'm going to be going with Part 3. Originally, this was going to be a spot ahead, and I was going to put the remake here, but I decided that Part 3 is going to go here. To me, Part 3 feels a little bit like a filler movie. Because we have obviously the original, we have part 2, we have part 3, and then part 4, and I like to see that as the end of a series of the beginning Friday the 13th movies. You can include part 5, but it's kind of a standalone because it was going in a completely different direction. I thought part 3 felt like the filler one because, well, for one, it was in the middle of it, so it didn't really add much to the plot at all. And for 2, it, in my opinion, was not the best of that trilogy of part 2, part 3, and part 4, because the first half of this film tends to drag a lot, which at least we have pretty... I actually kind of like some of the characters in this film, and I don't like them because they're goofy. I like them because their personalities are unique, and they're enjoyable to hear them have conversations with each other and stuff like that. But the first half of this film drags quite a bit. It would have been okay if they would have had a kill right off the bat or something like that, but no. We just have this first half of the film, I'm pretty sure nothing really happens. Maybe we get 1 or 2 kills, and we're sitting here with our main characters just waiting for something to happen, but it drags along so much, mainly because one of our characters keeps playing pranks on the other characters, making it seem like he was dead, or he was getting killed by Jason, and it was all just a prank. And he does this, I believe, 3 or 4 times in this movie, which is the main part of why this movie drags a lot in the first half. And then after that, obviously, it had to pick up its pace really quickly because it had to kill off all these side characters that we had. Final Girl is okay. Final battle with the Final Girl and Jason is okay. Don't think it's one of the most amazing final battles. Certainly a lot better ones out there, even ones that are below this list, like Freddy vs. Jason. Thought that final battle was a lot better. Some of the acting feels a little bit weird. It has that early Friday the 13th acting that is really bad, sometimes bad and sometimes cringy. Kills are pretty great though. Jason, obviously it's our first movie where we get Jason in full form, the Jason that we all think of. Obviously, when you think of Friday the 13th, I'm sure a lot of you think of the part 3 Jason, so this feels like the most generic Friday the 13th movie for that reason. So I think that's all there is to say about part 3. I just think it's at number 5 because it feels like a filler movie to me. That's the main reason. So let's get on to the next position. Number 4. You're probably going to hate me even more for this now that I'm putting this one below another movie that you're probably thinking about. But at number 4, I'm putting in part 2. I'm sorry, guys. I don't care if you're yelling at the screen. Part 2 is going at number 4. I do enjoy part 2 a whole lot. Probably one of the most rewatchable Friday the 13th movies in the franchise. Definitely enjoy part 2. But I guess I'll talk about the positives, and then I'll talk about why it goes at number 4 and not number 3. And I'll discuss why number 3 is at that, which will explain why this is here. So I'll explain more in the next one, but let's just talk about the positives and negatives as usual. I know some people have a problem with Jason being it being a baghead Jason instead of the traditional hockey Jason, or hockey mask Jason. I don't really have a problem with it because until the final battle of the movie, just like I discussed with many other movies previous on this list, most of the kills are off screen anyway, so we don't get to see Jason, and the kills are pretty good for the most part. So if the kills are pretty good and he's off screen, I don't really have any problem with that, as long as the kills themselves are not off screen. Final battle with the Final Girl is really, really awesome, and definitely made the Final Girl a lot better than she would have been if this final battle hadn't been the way that it had been. I thought that when she enters the shack for the first time and she sees that shrine with his mother's head on there, she puts on the sweater and tricks Jason. Just a very iconic Friday the 13th scene, and made for a nice final battle. Obviously, it did not end there, but the final battle was really great, and we had a really great Final Girl. I thought this Final Girl was a lot better than the previous Final Girl that we had before. So, unfortunately, it's not the original's fault. They brought back the Final Girl from the original. So the first 10 minutes of this movie, I think, are just there to have us to give us an opening sequence that will get us warmed up. So I don't think they needed to do that. They could have just done it with random characters instead of the Final Girl from the original movie and just killing her off in the first 10 minutes of the movie. So this movie does not drag as much as part 3, but still does have a little drag between the first half and the second half. But other than that, I really do enjoy this movie, but you'll learn why it is at number 4 instead of higher on this list when I discuss the next movie on this list. So that's it for part 2. At number 3, I know some of you, when you hear this, you are going to scream at me, and you're probably already screaming because this movie is this high on the list. But at number 3, I have to have respect for the Friday the 13th remake. This is just so unusual for a slasher remake to be ranked this high on the list, and the original to be ranked that low on the list. But I think that Friday the 13th gets the Friday the 13th reboot gets way too much hate than it deserves. The main reason why this movie is above part 3 and part 2 is because at least the first half of the movie they played it smart, and we had a completely different set of characters that were just there to be killed, but also because one of the characters that comes back to the final battle was in this first half, and she'll come back to the final battle later on in the movie. So they played it really smart in the first half by giving us a completely different set of counselors to be killed, except for one of them, which would be one of our final girls in the final battle. So they played it really, really smart, and for that reason, this movie does not drag like part 2 and part 3 do. So this movie keeps you on your toes for throughout the film. There's not a part where I think that the movie is dragging, because the first half and the second half are completely different sets of characters that Jason gets to kill off. Second of all, the Jason in this movie is very intimidating. Probably one of the best Jasons, because he is just so intimidating and scary in this movie. And I like Jason being scary over Jason just slaughtering people. And he does slaughter people in this movie. That's how it is. But at least if he's just going by and steamrolling most of the characters in this movie, he is really intimidating and really scary. And it is emphasized in the first half of this movie, especially when one of the characters, I believe it's Wayne, gets caught in a bear trap, and he's sitting there just screaming for his dear life, and he's screaming at Whitney to come and save him, and here comes Jason just rushing towards him with his machete, and he comes in and just swings it at him. It's just really scary and really suspenseful. Just, my God, Jason is very scary in this movie. So yeah, Jason, really awesome. The only problem with this movie, probably one of the main reasons why it is not any higher on this movie or on this list, is it felt like they were forcing the characters to be bad in this movie. Literally every other character besides the final characters are just complete throwaways. From the very moment that you see them, you want to see them being killed. So I don't know why they forced that onto you. I think it was just because they wanted to give you those early Friday the 13th vibes where the characters are just really terrible and you know they're going to get killed. But they didn't need to push it in our faces so much to the point where we just want to see them die right away. So the characters, besides the final characters, are really terrible. But the final character is pretty good. We get Whitney. We get, forget the other girl's name, but she was interested in Whitney's brother, who was looking out for his missing sister, Whitney, who went missing because Jason kidnapped her. I think that's a little bit weird that he kidnapped her instead of just killing her right off the bat. It just didn't really make any sense to me. I think it was just a kind of a plot device so that they could keep her for the final battle. I don't think the final battle is all that satisfying. We get two of our characters that we were kind of beginning to like even more than Whitney, who ended up being the final survivor, killed off in the final battle. So I thought the final battle wasn't that satisfying, but the kills were really great. Jason was very intimidating, and this movie didn't drag at all. So Friday the 13th, the remake, I have a lot of respect for it. I'm sorry if you hate it. Just don't hate me for it. But I can totally understand why you think that Friday the 13th, the remake, sucks. So that's it. Number 2, another difficult decision, but ultimately I had to put Part 6, Jason Lives, at number 2 spot, which I of course do have Part 6, Jason Lives at this on this t-shirt, which funny enough, it's actually the remake Jason who's on the photo and not the Part 6 Jason. But Part 6 feels like such a satisfying sequel to the Friday the 13th franchise. It reminds me of Halloween H2O, where we had all those terrible sequels before it, and this one just feels like redemption. And I'm not saying, well, Part 4 and Part 3 and Part 2 were definitely not as terrible as Part 4, Part 5, and Part 6 in the Halloween franchise. But this sequel felt so satisfying and so redeeming after the previous sequels that we had in the Friday the 13th franchise. Jason Lives is your typical Friday the 13th movie, but I think it's great for being a very typical Friday the 13th movie. It is executed really well. There are a lot of good kills. The Jason is played really well. The movie does not drag at all, so that's one of the main reasons why it's better than Part 2 and Part 3, which are very similar to it. So the pacing is really great. The characters aren't throwaway. They're not likable at all. They're just your average Friday the 13th characters. Tommy Jarvis makes a really great appearance in this movie, and the final girl along with Tommy Jarvis also makes a really great appearance, and it makes for a really great final battle sequence where we have all the kids in the cabins watching them as they try to sink Jason into the river or into the lake. I thought it was a really good final battle sequence, and I liked the parts where it was a little bit suspenseful and Jason was in the cabin full of the kids, and the kids were scared that Jason was going to kill them or something like that. Added a little bit of suspense to the movie. The only thing that I don't like, and this is honestly just nitpicking, is that they changed the name of the camp for the sake of the plot to try to make it more sense, but I don't think it was necessary at all. They changed the name of the camp from Camp Crystal Lake to Forest Green or something like that. I just don't think that was necessary at all, and it definitely didn't bring it to number 2 spot because it's just such a negligible nitpick to this movie. But Jason Lives Part 2 goes right here on the list. And at least my number 1 spot is not that controversial. I know a lot of people have this at their number 1 spot. I'm going to be doing Part 4, the final chapter, which this is probably has one of the best slasher horror movie endings. Don't think it's as good as the H2O ending from Halloween, but still a very satisfying ending. I could see why some people don't enjoy it because it's a 12-year-old kid killing Jason, and that's when Jason was supposed to be killed. But I think Jason Lives and Part 5 or A New Beginning make this ending look better because they increase the importance of Tommy Jarvis's character. For being only, I think, 10 or 12 years old at the time, he did a great job being a character in the Friday the 13th movie and made for a really good ending and satisfying conclusion to the movie. The kills are really great. You have your average Friday the 13th characters. The movie does not drag like Part 2 and Part 3 do, in my opinion. And we also have a nice setting. Rather than just having the regular cabin setting, we do get 2 different houses. We get the Jarvis house and we get the party house with all of the counselors in it and stuff like that. So they utilize that really well with Jason going in the house and killing different characters in the house, which I forgot to compliment other movies for doing that because obviously A New Beginning took place in Pinehurst, which was a big house, and Part 2 took place in Packanack, and they utilized that aspect really well in those movies as well. I think they even did it better than in the final chapter, but the final chapter is still better in my opinion. Because of many other reasons. Yeah, just a very satisfying conclusion to the original trilogy, to the Friday the 13th franchise. I don't think I have to explain a lot to tell you how good the final chapter is, and Jason makes one of the best performances in the Friday the 13th franchise. So, the final chapter, it goes at number 1. Alright, so thank God this ranking is over. I already did one whole take on this, and I went to the editing, and it was completely ruined. So, I'm just so happy that I got this done, and I wanted to do this for you because I wanted to deliver you some bonuses because it is October this month, and I wanted to live up to the name of my channel, so make sure you stay tuned for all that future content that is being coming. There's a lot of juicy horror content and DVD content and whatnot, rankings coming in the future, so make sure you stay tuned for that and read the community posts that you can stay updated with any potential future changes. I'm going to record the Halloween ranking after this. And unfortunately, I did not get the poster before the Halloween ranking, but I will probably post it in the community tab. I'll talk about more in the Halloween ranking, but I'll post it in the community tab, so don't worry about it. I think that's all there is for the video. Join the Discord, link will always be in the description of every video, and that's it. Like and subscribe, guys, and I'll see you next time.